Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The processors were worth more than the black tide, and Jace wouldn't stop saying so. 40 million, he said, palms behind his head, boots on the console. Minimum, each crate. Feet down, Marshall said. 40 million per crate, and the man wants my feet down. Collins laughed from the pilot's seat. Bran didn't. Bran was on his back under the starboard coupling, arm buried to the elbow, in a panel that should have been sealed at the shipyard and never was. "This weld's older than Jace's jokes," he called. "Nothing's older than Jace's jokes," Collins said. "Hilarious," Jace said. "All of you. A whole crew of comedians and one functional pilot." The crates sat strapped in the hold behind them, 16 of them. Directorate stamps still on the casings, scratched but not gone, because Bran said scratching them off cost time, and time was the one thing a smuggler couldn't steal back. They'd lifted them off a freight relay 2 systems back. Clean. No shots. Marshall liked clean. "Buyers at Vale Station in 9 hours, Marshall said. "We drift in slow, we drift in quiet." The board lit red. Collins sat forward. The laughter was gone from his voice before it left his mouth. "Contact. Aft. Burning hard." Marshall crossed to the console. "Tag it." Directorate cutter. Collins's hands were already moving. "Reading us. They're reading the cargo." "Of course they're reading the cargo," Jace said, feet down now. "It screams. 16 crates of stolen military silicon. It screams across half the system." "Carter," Bran said from the floor. He'd slid out from under the coupling. "That's Carter's ship, interdiction wing." "How do you know?" "I know the hull profile. Carter's the most stubborn bastard in the Directorate." A voice came through, flat and bored, the boredom of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "Unregistered freighter. Cut your drive. Prepare to be boarded by order of the Terran Frontier Directorate." Nobody on the black tide moved to cut anything. "He doesn't want us," Marshall said. "He wants what's in the hold." "Comforting," Jace said. "Means he won't shoot the cargo. Means he wants us slow, not dead." Marshall dropped into the seat beside Collins. "Collins, how far to the jump line?" "Too far. He'll have us locked before we're clear." "Then make it not too far." Collins burned the drive. The black tide kicked. Behind them the cutter matched, then gained, because cutters were built to gain, and freighters were built to carry. The gap closed in numbers on Collins's screen, and the numbers were ugly. "He's got firing solution in 90 seconds, Bran said, back at his panel, ripping the cover clean off now. "Maybe less." "The jump drive's not spun up," Collins said. "Spin it up." "From here? Half charged? We don't know what's on the other side of the line. Charts thin out past the veil. Marshall, there's nothing surveyed out there." 60 seconds, Bran said. Marshall looked at the closing numbers, looked at the half-charged drive. A blind jump on a half-charge could put them inside a star, could tear the ship in half, could do nothing at all and leave them sitting still while Carter walked aboard. "Do it blind," Marshall said. Collins stared at him. "Marshall, 640 million says we don't get boarded. Spin it and throw us anywhere that isn't here." 30 seconds, Bran said. Jace was already strapping in. "I want it on record I said the cargo screams." "Noted," Marshall said. "Collins." Collins's jaw set. He fed the drive everything it had and aimed at a stretch of black nobody had charted, because charted black was where Carter was, and Collins picked the devil he didn't know. Jumping. The cutter fired. The black tide folded. The shot went through space where they'd been. They came out wrong. The drive screamed coming down, half-charge bleeding off in a shudder that ran through the deck and into their teeth. Collins fought the controls. Bran was already swearing at a panel that had cooked itself in the fold. "Where are we?" Marshall said. "I don't know." Collins's voice was tight. "I don't know. The nav can't match anything. There's no beacon. There's no lane." He stopped. "There's a planet. Close. Inhabited. Reading power. Lots of it. Surface grid. Anybody following?" "No. We're alone." A pause. "We jumped blind, Marshall. Nobody followed that." Relief moved through the cabin, small and careful. The relief of men who'd cheated something and weren't sure yet what. "Then we sit down," Marshall said. "Quiet. Fix the drive. Charge it full. Jump back to charted space when nobody's looking. Collins, find me ground." Collins found ground. The city came up under them, gray and vast. Low buildings packed tight around a wide, flat sprawl that had to be a market. Vehicles and bodies moving in it by the thousands. Collins put the black tide down at the edge of it, behind a row of silent freight haulers, and killed the drive. The silence after was total. "Air?" Marshall said. Bran checked. Breathable. Thin. Cold. He frowned at the reader. "Smells wrong, though." Reader says fine. "My gut says wrong." "Your gut isn't certified." "My gut's right more than the reader." They went out anyway, because they needed parts, and the market had parts. And 4 armed humans in a crowd was 4 armed humans in a crowd, no matter whose crowd it was. It wasn't a human crowd. The Sarek were tall and gray-scaled, long-jawed, moving on legs that bent the wrong way. They didn't look at the humans. That was the first thing Marshall clocked. In any market in human space, 4 strangers drew eyes. Here, nothing. The Sarek moved past them with their heads down and their pace quick, and not one of them met an eye. "They're not selling food," Jace said, low. He was right. The stalls weren't stalls. They were pens. Long enclosures ran down the center of the market, filled with captives of a dozen species, perhaps more. None of them Sarek, packed behind bars and standing very still. Gray-uniformed Sarek walked the rows with slates, tapping, marking, sorting. At the end of each row, a ramp climbed into the belly of a transport ship, dull and windowless, and the sorted ones walked up the ramps and did not come down. "That's not a market," Bran said. "That's a loading dock." A family stood near the nearest pen. Sarek, civilian, a parent and 2 small ones. The parent spoke to a uniformed officer, calm, almost bored, and pointed at a third Sarek, older, ragged, head bowed, and signed something on the officer's slate. The officer took the old one by the arm. The family turned and walked away without looking back, the small ones already distracted by something else. "They're turning in their own," Jace said. "Their own people. Like it's nothing." "Debtors," Marshall said. "Outcasts, whatever they call the bottom." He kept his voice flat. "Doesn't matter. Not our problem. Parts, drive, gone." Then a uniformed Sarek stopped in front of them. It looked at the humans the way none of the others had. Up. Down. Up again. Its jaw worked. It had never seen a human before. That was plain on it, in the way it leaned and stared. And it lifted its slate and said something into a translator that came out in clicks the human's ears couldn't parse. "We're just passing," Marshall said, slow, hands open. "Travelers. We don't want trouble." The Sarek clicked again. More of them were turning now. The crowd that hadn't looked at anything was looking at this. "Unregistered," the translator finally spat in broken Terran. "Processing world. Tarsus. Species. Unlisted. Origin. Unlisted. "We'll register," Jace said. "Happy to. Where's the office?" "Unlisted," the Saurik repeated. And it wasn't a question anymore. It was a category. And a category had a procedure. And the procedure was the ramp. More uniforms closed in. Weapons came up, long, thin, humming. Brand's hand went to his sidearm. Marshall caught his wrist. 20 of them, Marshall said under his breath. In a crowd. On their ground. He let go. Not now. They took the humans' weapons. They took them by the arms. And Marshall let it happen, because the math was the math, and a dead crew couldn't fix a drive. The Saurik walked them up the ramp. Behind them, at the city's edge, the sky cracked with a re-entry burn. Brand twisted to look. Through the ramp's closing gap, he saw it. A human cutter, Directorate Gray, dropping through the cloud and slowing over the market. Too late. Hunting a signal that had already gone cold. "Carter," Brand breathed. "He followed the jump signature. He's right there." The ramp sealed. The transport lifted, and the last thing the Black Tide's crew saw of open sky was the alien hull around them folding into the fold of an FTL jump. While below, shrinking, the gray cutter circled the empty market and found nothing but a freighter with 16 stolen crates and no crew to arrest. The transport had no windows, so they learned the prison by its sounds first. The drive cut. The deck tilted. Something huge and mechanical seized the hull and dragged it, and the dragging went on too long, deeper than any docking, down into something. Then the doors opened on Kairos 9. The cold came first. Then the light, gray, sourceless, the flat, dead light of a place that had never seen a sun. They were herded out into a receiving hall the size of a hangar, and the hall was full. Full of species. The pens from the market multiplied 1,000 times, every shape of alien life shuffling in long gray lines toward processing gates at the far wall. Saurik and White walked the lines, not gray uniforms now. White. Clinical white. "This isn't a prison," Brand said. "It's a prison," Marshall said. "No." Brand had stopped walking. A guard shoved him forward and he walked, but his eyes were moving. The mechanic's eyes, reading the room the way he read an engine. Prisons have cells. Where are the cells? There were no cells. There were doors. The lines fed into the processing gates, and past the gates the corridors branched, and the corridors were labeled, not in numbers, but in a Saurik script repeated over and over in colored bands, and Jace, who read fast and read anything, was already trying to crack it. "That one," he murmured, nodding at a band of corridor signage. "Same symbol over every door down that hall. Whatever's behind those doors, it's all the same thing." A processing gate took the human in front of them. A small, gray-furred alien, four-armed, shaking. The Saurik in White scanned it, read the slate, and instead of waving it through, paused. Tapped the slate. Something on the wall above the gate lit amber. 2 more whitecoats came. They took the four-armed alien out of the line. It made a sound, high, looping, the same 3 notes over and over. And they walked it not toward the cells that didn't exist, but down the hall Jace had marked, the one where every door was the same. The notes kept going after the alien was out of sight. Then a door opened and closed somewhere down that hall, and the notes stopped. Cut clean, mid-loop, like a switch thrown. Nobody in the gray lines reacted. They'd heard it before. They knew what the silence meant, and they kept shuffling forward toward the gates with their heads down, the exact way the market crowd had kept their heads down, and Marshall understood for the first time that the head down wasn't fear of the guards. It was knowing. "Marshall," Collins said quietly, "what is this place?" Marshall didn't answer. He was looking at the wall beside the human line, where the white coats stacked the things the processed didn't need any more. A bin, chest high, and in it, sorted and clean and catalogued with little Soric tags, were limbs. Arms, legs, whole and partial, scaled and furred and smooth, a dozen species deep, each one tagged and numbered like parts in Brand's own hold. And on top, fresh, still wearing a sleeve of gray market cloth, a four-armed gray-furred limb that had been attached to something making 3 looping notes about 90 seconds ago. The line moved them forward. The gate took them in. The gate read them one at a time and decided what they were. Marshall went first. A white coat pressed a scanner to his throat, watched a slate, and made a sound. Low, interested. 2 guards pulled him left. Brand came through, and the slate did something different. The white coat leaned in, scanned twice, and Brand went right, hard. 4 guards on him instead of 2. Collins and Jace were waved straight through to a holding floor with the rest of the unremarkable stock. "Marshall," Collins said. "Move when they move," Marshall said over his shoulder, already going. "Don't give them a reason." Then he was gone through a door, and the door was the same as every door. The holding floor was a sea of species. Collins and Jace stood in it and learned the rules by watching. Prisoners moved when a tone sounded. They stopped when it stopped. They held out their arms for scanning without being told. A 6-limbed thing ahead of them missed a tone, distracted or sick, and a guard didn't shout. The guard simply marked the slate. Within a minute, 2 white coats came and walked the 6-limbed thing down a hall, and it didn't fight, and the line closed over the space where it had been like water. "They don't punish," Jace said quietly. "They sort." A Soric in white walked the floor with a younger one trailing behind, taking instruction. The elder gestured across the rows the way a foreman might direct warehouse stock. Hold the furred ones. Send the aquatics to another section. Move the large specimens to the rear. The younger one wrote everything down. Neither lowered a voice. Nothing here needed to be hidden, because nothing here was wrong. The beings in those rows weren't people to them. They were inventory. Above the floor, on a railed platform, a figure watched. Taller. Robed, not coated. 3 others stood a careful step behind it, and the careful step told Collins everything about who it was before he knew the name. The robed one watched the sorting with its hands folded and its long head tilted, and when it moved to leave, the 3 behind it moved exactly when it moved. "That one's not a doctor," Collins said. "No," Jace said. "He's the one who owns the doctors." Elsewhere in the complex, Marshall's processing had taken a different path. They put him in a gallery. That was the only word for it. A curved room with a sloped floor and a glass wall. And behind the glass, a surgical theater. And Marshall was one of a dozen prisoners made to stand and watch. He didn't understand why until the whitecoats brought in the female. She was Soric, civilian marked, like the ones from the Tarsus market, and visibly pregnant. She was calm at first. Calm like someone who believed she was about to be helped. They laid her down. They strapped the long limbs. A richly robed Soric watched from the side of the theater, not working, only observing, and made a note on a slate when the first incision went in. It went wrong the way it was designed to go wrong. They weren't trying to save anything. They were measuring. Marshall watched them measure, and watched the calm leave her in stages, and watched the moment, exact, unmissable, when the small movements under her ribs that had been steady went still. The note-taking noble made another note, adjusted something. Then the whitecoats opened her farther and carefully removed what they had come for, measuring organs, taking samples, recording every finding with quiet precision. That had been the purpose all along. Marshall made himself keep his eyes open because closing them felt like letting them do it twice. When it was over, a junior white coat hosed the theater, and the next subject was already at the door. Marshall did not move. His hands were flat against his thighs, his breathing slow and even, his eyes dry. The old gray-furred prisoner beside him glanced at the human's unnatural stillness and quietly edged away. Around here, anything unusual drew the white coat's attention. 2 sectors away, Jace was learning what the colored bands meant. He'd cracked the script by then, enough of it. The band over his own hall meant viable. The band over the next meant something close to spent. And the band over the small hall, the bright one, the one with the lower doors, meant a word that didn't carry across the translator cleanly, but landed in his gut as small. A family had come in behind his group. He'd seen them on the transport. A parent, 3 young, all the same soft-shelled species, all sent together, because on Tarsus, the whole household went when the household was condemned. The young ones had stayed close to the parent the entire ride. They were still close when the whitecoats read the slate and the band over the small hall lit, and Jace understood the sorting logic a half-second before the parent did. The young were viable for things the grown weren't. Smaller systems, faster to test, cheaper to lose. The parent made a sound Jace would carry a long way. The guards were already between them. They walked the 3 young ones toward the bright band, and they walked the parent toward viable, and the parent fought. The only one Jace had seen fight all day. And a guard marked the slate, and that was all. A mark. Jace stood with his hands open at his sides and did nothing, because there were 40 of them, and the doors were the same, and doing nothing cost him something he didn't have a name for yet. Bran's route ended at a different door. The guards marched him through without a word. The instant he crossed the threshold, something struck the side of his neck. A sharp pulse, hot and electric, with no barb and no wound. His legs vanished beneath him before he could turn. Darkness took him before he hit the floor. He woke strapped to a table with his arm and his leg gone, and the absence so total he kept trying to move them. They hadn't taken the limbs as a punishment. He worked that out fast, because the mechanic in him read the room before the rest of him caught up. The table was clean. The instruments were arranged. This was a procedure, not cruelty. There were 2 of them, a senior in deep-collared white and a junior. On a rack beside the table sat the arm and the leg they meant to give him, and they were not Sarek and not flesh. Dark metal, near black, jointed in a way Bran's eye followed with reluctant admiration even through the haze. The senior lifted the slate, said a word, Netherium, and the junior made a gesture Bran would learn meant doubt. He learned a lot in the next while by watching their body language, because they spoke in front of him the way the floor foreman spoke in front of the stock. They didn't expect him to live. That was the whole of it. The junior gestured at a readout, and then at the alloy, and the gesture said, "Why waste it?" The senior answered with a sharp motion toward Bran. Human. New. Worth the alloy. They fitted the leg first. When the alloy met the open wound and bonded, the pain took Bran somewhere white and wordless, and he came back to the senior, watching a readout with its long head very still. The readout should have climbed. Rejection had a signature, and the signature should have started. It didn't start. The senior tapped the slate, tapped it again, fitted the arm, faster now, interested, and the same wrong thing happened, which was nothing, which was Bran's body closing around the alloy like it had been waiting for it. The junior took a step back from the table. The senior did not. The senior leaned in over the human who was supposed to be dying, and was instead lying there breathing, eyes open, watching them back. And for the first time since the gate, Bran saw a Sorek look unsure. "It hurts," Brown said. His voice was wrecked. He made it work anyway, because a man who can still talk is still in the fight. Bet you've never heard one of us say that. The senior didn't understand the words. It understood the steadiness under them, and it took its own step back, and it reached for the slate to send word up the only direction that mattered. Word went up, and up was a contest. The senior reported to the research head, Sethric, and Sethric did not report it onward. He stood for a long moment with the slate in his hand, staring at the impossible survival data, while ambition quietly replaced surprise. On Kairos 9, discoveries were never just discoveries. The prison world belonged to Duke Zeran Valis, but beneath him each sector answered to a different noble house, and every house guarded its research, like treasure. Prestige rose with results. So did power. A finding like this could lift an entire house, or bury another beneath it. A spontaneous bond with untested Netherium in a species the program had never run? That was not a finding to hand a rival. That was a finding to ripen. The noble over Sethric's sector was Baron Koreth, ambitious, underfunded, and always hunting the next discovery that might lift his house a little closer to the Duke's favor. Rumor reached him before the report did. By the time Sethric finished deciding the human would remain hidden, Koreth was already walking into the laboratory. Nobles did not visit research floors without reason. "A bond," Koreth said. "I'm told there was a bond." "There was a complication," Sethric replied. "We're verifying." "Verify faster. The Duke values speed." Sethric's eyes never left the slate. "The Duke values certainty. I'd hate to present His Grace with a result that failed the second trial. That reflects poorly on the sector, and on its patron." The conversation remained courteous. The rivalry beneath it did not. If the discovery reached Duke Valis under Koreth's name, the Baron's house would rise with it. If Sethric kept control long enough to complete the work himself, the achievement would be tied to his name forever. Neither could seize the prize openly without triggering a confrontation they could not yet afford, so they fenced with careful words, while, farther down the hall, the human lay hidden beneath a deliberately falsified sample number. Above them both, Duke Zeran Valis already knew. A duke who did not know what happened inside his own sectors did not remain a duke for long, and Valis had ruled Kairos 9 long enough to understand that ambition was cheaper than obedience. He let Koreth and Sethric maneuver because their rivalry cost him nothing, and sooner or later always produced results. He had watched 100 species pass through the gates. The human anomaly was only the latest report carried to his high gallery by an aide who chose every word with care. Valis tilted his long head. He was not cruel in any way he would have recognized. He simply believed, with the full weight of generations behind him, that the universe divided naturally into those who studied and those who were studied. His family had stood on the proper side of that divide for longer than memory, and it had never occurred to him to question it. "Let them contest it," Valis said. "Bring me whichever one wins, and the human." When the day's testing ended, the survivors were herded back onto a common rest floor. The Sauric made no effort to keep species, or even test groups, separate. There was no reason to. Stock returned to the rack between uses, and what happened there was of no consequence to anyone who mattered. That was how the four found each other again. Bran came in last, walking. The Netherium leg carried him with an uneven rhythm, wrong and right at the same time, and when the others saw the black arm and matching leg, nobody spoke for a long moment. "It works," Bran said finally, sitting, careful. "That's the thing nobody will believe. It works, and it's not supposed to, and they don't know why." He flexed the dark hand. The fingers closed. "I don't know why. Yet." Collins hadn't spoken since the holding floor. He'd spent the day among the unremarkable stock, the spent ones, the long-term ones, and he'd watched the thing that broke him quietly. He said it now, low. There was a man today. Not human, but a man. You'd have called him a man. Been here years, you could tell. A guard dropped a slate near him, right at his feet. Collins looked at his own hands, and he picked it up, handed it back. Nobody made him. He just handed it back and stepped back into line. He looked up. They don't fight because they've done the math we did at the market. 20 of them. They're ground. Every day for years. Until the math is the only thing left in you, and there's no you underneath it. Nobody answered that. Marshall was looking at the middle distance with the stillness the old prisoner had edged away from. Jace's hands hadn't been right since the bright band. I watched them open one up, Marshall said. Carrying. They timed how long it took the inside one to stop. He said it flat, all the way flat, which was how they all understood how far from flat it was. It's not war to them. It's not even hate. It's inventory. Kids, Jace said. That was all. Kids, and they marked a slate. Marshall stood up. We're not getting out, he said. Let's put that down first, so nobody's carrying it. No ship, no charts, no rescue coming for 4 pirates nobody's looking for. He looked at each of them. But I'm done being inventory. And Bran's got something in his arm they can't explain, and Jace can read their doors, and Collins knows what every prisoner on this floor would do if the math ever changed. He let that sit. So we don't escape. We don't wait. We take this place apart from the inside until there's nothing left for them to study. Bran flexed the black hand again, closed it. Burn it down, he said. Burn it down, Marshall said. Collins nodded, slow. Jace last, jaw tight. 4 men. No weapons, no plan, no way out. And for the first time since the gate sealed behind them, the math had a new number in it. And that number was them. They assumed they had 3 days before the Sarek decided what to do with Bran, and they spent the time learning the building. Jace did it with his eyes. He'd been moved to a cleaning detail, low stock, low watch, and a mop bucket went anywhere. He walked the halls reading bans, red over the processing gates, amber over the spent wings, and down past a blast door that took 2 Sarek to open, a band he'd seen nowhere else, over a hall that breathed heat. He stood near it once, long enough to feel the floor warm through his boots, long enough to hear the deep industrial pulse underneath everything. He came back and drew the map in grease on the underside of a rack. Here, he said, everything routes here. Power, the alloy lines, the heat. They make the metal here. The limbs, the plating, whatever they're building. It's the engine of the whole place. He tapped the grease. And it's the one section with no prisoners in it. Just machines and a few techs. Because it's the one place they can't afford us, Marshall said. Right. Bran learned the building a different way. He learned it through his own arm. In the dark, on the rest floor, he tested the thing they'd bolted to him. The Nitherium didn't tire. He'd grip a steel rack upright and feel the metal give before the limb did. He pressed the dark hand flat to the floor and pushed, and his whole body lifted, like the arm didn't know what his weight was supposed to cost. The Sarek had built it to bond, and they'd been so amazed it bonded that nobody had measured what it could do once it had. How hard can you close it? Marshall asked him. Bran looked at the hand. Don't know yet. Harder than they think. Collins worked the prisoners. He didn't recruit. Recruiting got you marked. He watched instead. 3 days wasn't enough to build trust, but it was enough to learn who still looked at the guards instead of the floor. The 6-limbed laborer watched every patrol change. The old aquatic in the tank suit never stopped counting routes through the room. Two of the soft-shelled prisoners quietly traded places whenever inspections came, shielding the weaker of their group without drawing attention to it. Tiny things, easy to miss unless you were looking for them. Collins was. He spoke to them when no guard was close enough to care. Never about escape, never about fighting. Just enough to learn that none of them expected to leave Kairos 9 alive, and none of them intended to spend whatever time remained helping it run. Out of the whole spent floor, he found 4 with something still burning behind the eyes. 4. Out of hundreds. "That's all?" Jace asked. "That's all," Collins said. "I didn't change anyone. I just found the ones who were already waiting. The rest'll watch. They won't move until they see it can be done." He looked at Brand's arm. Maybe not even then. Marshall studied the grease map a long time. "We don't free anyone," he said. "We don't hold ground. We get to the engine and we break it so hard they can't run this place." He looked up. Bran opens the door. Jace gets us through it blind. Collins's 4 make the noise that pulls the guards the wrong way. He paused. "And then we use their own forge on them." The Sauric moved their timeline first. A white coat came for Bran a day early. Sethric wanted his sample secured before Korath forced the issue, and securing it meant a cage Bran would not be walking out of. 2 guards. The standard 2, because nobody on Kairos 9 brought more than 2 for stock. They unstrapped him from the rest rack, and that was the mistake. Bran let them get him standing. He let them turn him toward the door. Then he closed the Netherium hand around the lead guard's weapon arm and found out the answer to Marshall's question. The arm came off, not cut. Torn free. The black hand simply kept closing until the shoulder failed. The guard made a sound no prisoner on that floor had ever heard a guard make, and Bran put the dark fist through the side of its head, and the sound stopped. The second guard brought its weapon up. Bran was already inside the reach of it. He took it by the throat with the metal hand and squeezed, and the thin neck did what the steel rack had done, gave before the limb did. And then there were 2 gray shapes on the floor, and a human standing over them breathing hard with black hands. The rest floor had gone dead silent. Hundreds of prisoners. Every eye. A guard, dead. 2 guards, dead, by a thing in a prison sleeve, and the world did not end. No gas, no reprisal in the first 3 seconds, or the next 3. The machine had no answer ready because the machine had never needed one. Collins moved into that silence. "Now," he said, low, and his 4 moved with him, the 6-limbed laborer first, tearing a rack strut free, then the others. They didn't roar. They didn't free the floor. They fell in around the 4 humans and took the dead guards' weapons, and the rest of the prisoners watched them do it and didn't move, didn't join, only watched with the held breath stillness of people who'd stopped believing in any direction but down. "They're not coming," Jace said. "Didn't think they would," Marshall said. "Move." The alarm reached Sethric as a single line on a slate, and the line was wrong in a way that took him a moment to credit. Stock fatalities were logged hourly. This was not a stock fatality. This was 2 guards dead and a sample unaccounted for, and the sample number, when he checked it, was the one he had filed wrong on purpose. His concealment turned in his hand like a blade gripped at the edge. He had hidden the human to ripen it. He had hidden it so well that now, when it mattered, the containment system did not know what it was hunting. Baron Korath knew within minutes because he had paid a tech in Sethric's sector to tell him exactly this. "Your verified anomaly," Korath said, arriving where Sethric stood, "appears to be killing my guards. They're the Duke's guards. They're dying in my sector." Korath's head tilted, and the tilt was pleasure barely held. A research head conceals an unstable subject, mislabels it, and it breaks containment. That's not a finding, Sethric. That's a failure with your name filed under it. Sethric said nothing, because there was nothing to say that Baron Korith would not carry upward and sharpen. Upward, Duke Zeran Valis was already informed. He stood in his high gallery and received the report with his hands folded, and what moved across his long face was not fear. Kairos 9 had held 10,000 desperate things across 40 years and broken every one of them. He had seen subjects fight at the table. He had never seen one organize, because the gate sorted the organizers out and the place ground the rest to passivity, and that grinding was the whole genius of it. "Improvised weapons?" he asked. "Its own hands, Your Grace." "The Nitherium." Duke Valis was quiet a moment. The thing he'd permitted Korith and Sethric to squabble over was loose and using the gift they'd given it as a tool against them. And somewhere under his certainty, a very old assumption shifted by a single degree. "Seal the sector wings," he said. "Pull guards from the engine if you have to. I want it cornered, not killed. It's still the most valuable thing on this world." He paused. "And it's only one." It was the order to pull guards from the engine that opened the door. Duke Valis had created the gap himself. Jace saw it before he understood it. The heat hall ahead, the blast door that normally stood under 2 Sarek, now watched by only 1. The order to seal the sector wings had pulled the second guard away. The math had changed, exactly the way Colin said it would if it ever did. Only this time, it changed for them. "Now's the gap," Jace said. "It won't last." Bran took the door. The Nitherium hands found the door's manual release and forced it, the metal arms doing the work of 4 Sarek, and the blast door ground open onto the engine of Kairos 9. The heat hit like a wall. It was a foundry. Vast, low, roaring lines of molten alloy running in channels, from a central crucible to the molds, where the limbs and the plating were cast. Nitherium, bright and white-orange, and moving like water, that wanted to be a weapon. 3 techs inside, and the soft-shelled prisoners and the 6-limbed laborer fell on them before they could reach an alarm. Bran stood in the heat and looked at the crucible and the channels and the heavy manual sluices that steered the pour, and the mechanic in him read the whole system in one breath. He didn't need it explained. It was a forge. He'd worked forges his whole life. The only difference was what came out of this one. "They've been pouring this stuff into us. Now we pour it into them." Beneath the foundry floor, directly under one of the runoff grates, sat the sector's guard station. The molten alloy flowed through channels overhead before feeding the casting molds. Jace read the grating layout off the wall in 3 seconds. Marshall saw what Bran saw. "Do it," Marshall said. Bran put both Nitherium hands on the manual sluice, the one a crew of techs was meant to turn slowly, with care, with respect for what it moved, and he turned it all the way. Fast, the way no one was ever supposed to. The sluice opened. Molten Nitherium left its course and found the grating and went through it, a falling rope of liquid metal pouring down into the station below, and the sound that came up was the sound of the place's own weapon used against the things that built it. The first pour. Starship alloy into a Sarek position, exactly as no prisoner in 40 years had ever managed, because no prisoner in 40 years had been a mechanic with hands that didn't burn. The foundry alarms finally caught up and began to scream. "That's it," Marshall said. "That's the wound. Out, before they wall us in." They went, the handful of them, back into the sealed halls of a prison that for the first time in its existence was on fire from the inside. While Kairos 9 burned from within, hidden beneath the shadow of its outer moon, a directorate cutter sat cold and silent, cloaked against the prison world's sensors. Captain Nick Carter had followed a jump signature past the veil into a system that wasn't on any directorate chart, and he had found a freighter abandoned on a gray market world with 16 crates of stolen processors still strapped in the hold and no crew anywhere. A smuggler did not leave 640 million behind. That had bothered him enough to keep going, quiet, running silent, until the uncharted world resolved on his sensors, and he understood what he was looking at. He had been watching Kairos 9 for 36 hours. He'd logged the transports. Dozens of species walked up the ramps and none came down. He'd logged the orbital defenses, heavy, layered, more than a prison needed, and exactly what a secret needed. And an hour ago he'd logged a heat bloom deep in the facility, an industrial signature spiking hard, and alarm traffic across Sauric channels his computer was only beginning to break. He didn't have all the pieces, but he had enough. Captain Nick Carter opened a tight beam channel, encrypted, aimed back across the veil toward Directorate space, toward the one man whose authority reached far enough to do something about what he was seeing. "This is Carter, Interdiction Wing, transmitting from beyond the veil line. Priority absolute." He kept his voice flat, the way he'd kept it flat ordering a freighter to cut its drive a week ago, before any of this. "I tracked the stolen cargo to an unsurveyed system. There's a facility here, alien, industrial scale. They're bringing in sentience by the shipload, every species but ours, as far as I can tell. And they are not bringing them back out." He looked at the heat bloom still burning on his screen. "And General, I think we've got humans down there. The crew I was chasing. Their ship's abandoned on the surface, and something inside that facility just started fighting back." A pause. "Requesting orders." The message folded into the dark, bound first for the nearest Directorate relay, 11 light minutes away, then onward, through jump relays toward General William Joseph, who had not yet heard the word that would turn a pirate hunt into a war.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.